you will need something to write upon or type upon really quickly, because what I'm going to give you is how to sell shit in 54 minutes. Okay? So I'm going to take you through. All of this will be familiar. You may not have pulled it into a specific process, but this is literally, once you've got a conversation with somebody, how do you sell things? Okay, you get a candidate on the line, you get a client on the line. How do you take them from hello to being a live candidate who's going forward for a role, or to giving you an opportunity? Be that presenting your candidate, getting a candidate send out, or actually winning a job order. Okay? Precisely the same process applies to winning a job order, to getting a send out, to winning a retainer, to doing contract, to doing perm. There is literally no difference, because what I'm going to show you is how you get inside somebody's head and motivate them to buy from you. Okay? To a degree, even the product doesn't matter that much. You could apply this to selling, I don't know, plumbing parts just as well as you could to recruitment, because the situation changes, but people is still people. Yeah? Human psychology is still human psychology. Okay, you've got somebody on the phone, you've got somebody on Zoom, you're having a conversation with them. Let us begin. Okay? First of all, the first thing that we have to do, bar none, is rapport. Oops, spell it correctly, Stephen. That's much more impressive if you do. Rapport. Now, rapport is nothing more than giving somebody the sense that you're on the same wavelength. It's creating a degree of comfort with them. Okay? Now, there used to be all this crap about, oh, you've got to have shared life experience and you've got to come from the same sort of background as it. No, that's just not true. They don't even have to like you. That's one of the most common things. Oh, you've got to make them laugh. You've got to make them like you. No. Oh, people buy people first. Well, that's illegal to start with. Buying people is bad. Okay? People don't necessarily buy from people they like. All things being equal, if you've got someone you think is scum and someone you like, you'll probably go with the one you like. But I'll tell you who they do buy from. They buy from people they trust. If they don't trust you, it doesn't matter how much they like you, they ain't buying anything. They ain't putting their career or their business in your hands. End of. Okay? So they have to trust you. So how do you build trust in 30 seconds? Well, it's really simple. Because there is one person that you trust more than any other human being, and that's you. Because you take you everywhere you go. And you make decisions all day long about what coffee to have or what coffee not to have or where to sit or what to do or what to say. You trust you implicitly. How would you function if you didn't? Yeah? Now, okay, there might be people that you look up to, but you trust you. Does that make sense? Yeah? Perfect. So if you can trigger that signal that goes, oh, they're just like me, then all of the associations that they have about themselves transfer to you. Okay? Automatic trait transfer, ATT. Okay? If you can transfer those traits of what they believe about themselves to you, you automatically develop trust and rapport. That feeling of, oh yeah, they're just like me. And you don't need shared life experience. You don't need to have gone to the same school, to the same college. You don't need to have all of the years of background. You don't need to, don't get me wrong. If you've put your stuff out on LinkedIn, if you've used the machine process, if you've done the 5-step marketing plan, and you are out there and they know you and they've seen your name and you talk sense, and most people's definition of sense is you say what they already agree with. Yeah. If you actually start to watch most politicians now, particularly Trump, okay? Trump, to people who don't agree with him, makes zero sense, no sense at all. We watch him and we listen to him and go, what? What on earth are you saying? But if you have the same viewpoints, if you have the same worldview as Trump espouses, you instantly go, my God, that man makes sense. Because he's saying exactly what I think, which is what Boris Johnson used to do. He used to say what people thought, so they bought into him and trusted and believed him. To the point where people wouldn't believe that they were fibbing ratbags. Though blatantly they are, both of them. Yeah? But that wouldn't stop them getting massive support this time or next time. Rapport. Trigger that, they're just like me. How do you do it? You can have life experiences, you can have whatevers, but the easiest thing is if you use behavioral rapport, which is if you act like them, you will be familiar to them as long as you're not mimicking. The difference between mimicking and matching behavior is whether they become aware of it, which is why you never go anywhere near accents or stutters and speech impediments or anything like that. Yeah? But what you can do, you're on the phone, you're on a Zoom with someone. If you're on a Zoom with someone, you can put your head in the same position they do. Okay? Now, if you actually think about it, you're literally mirroring them because they tip their head to the right, you tip yours to the left. Okay? But on screen, it sends the signal. Oh. If you're on the phone with somebody, you speak at the same speed, you speak at the same volume, and you pick up on their key words. If somebody says something is interesting, you use the word interesting. Not fascinating, not appealing. You use their keywords back to them. And that little bell goes off. Oh, they're just like me. Because people who speak fast tend to speak fast because they're thinking fast. People who speak slowly tend to speak slowly because they're thinking about things in more, I was going to say more detail. They think about things in at a slower rate. Okay? Doesn't mean they're slower, just means they're thinking at a different speed. Okay? People who speak fast tend to have a certain kind of behavior that goes with it. Okay? People who speak loud or soft. Okay? If you get somebody's tonality right, so if you're speaking at the same speed and the same volume and you have the same sort of tonality, okay? If you've got somebody who speaks like I'm speaking now and you hit them up like the cliche salesperson off YouTube that I was watching 5 minutes ago, hey, it's Steve calling, how you doing? Dear God, okay? What the hell? That's why the cliched salesperson is commonly thought of as, what's the word? Cock. Yeah? Because it's not because they are, well, not always because they are, but it is because they're not like me. They don't speak like I do. I speak like this. They speak like that. Oh, I'm uncomfortable. I'm mismatching. That's not right. The more you're like them, the more they'll like you. The more you're like them, the more they'll like you. People like people like them. Make sense? Yeah. As you progress in the conversations, you progress in the relationship, you can develop deeper levels of rapport. You can develop psychological rapport. You can develop life experience rapport. If you do business with somebody, you'll eventually develop rapport just because you've done business together. You said you would do X, you did X, they therefore trust you based on experience. But in the first 5 minutes, the first couple of conversations, you don't have that, but you can get behavioral rapport. Make sense, guys? Yep. I know that sounds really obvious, but you'd be amazed how many people just plain don't do it. My first check, anytime I go to a new client or a new prospect, if I'm in their offices, I just listen to people make 2 or 3 calls in a row. And if I hear that they sound exactly the same on 3 calls in a row, I know they're not doing this. Because the chances of you getting 3 people who speak the same volume, speak the same speed, use the same keywords in 3 consecutive calls, well, if you can do that, let me know what the numbers are on next week's lottery. It's as simple as that. That is your key. That opens the door. Nothing else matters if you don't get that right. Make sense? Yeah? Which is why when I was doing big seminars, you can't really do it with a small group, but when you're doing big seminars, the first thing I will do is get people to stand up or sit down or move around, or I'll get them to open their book at a certain time, go to a certain page, write down certain words, because then I've got 500 people or 100 people or 1,000 people or whatever doing the same thing I am at the same time I am, with exactly the same gestures in exactly the same way I am. That's forced rapport. I'm not responding to them, I'm making them respond to me, which is how you'll see people who can just walk up on stage and for no apparent reason, 5 minutes later, everybody's with them. Okay? Now, sometimes it is charisma and charm. But I've met a lot of the world's biggest speakers. A lot of the time, it ain't charisma or charm, I promise you. It's skill and technique. Yeah. So that's a much more extreme example. That's forced rapport. This is behavioral rapport. Gets the conversation rolling. Comfy? Happy? Make sense? Yeah. Okay. What we're now going to do is get the conversation rolling, and we get the conversation rolling with questions. Because until you're talking, it ain't a question. It ain't a conversation. Until you're talking, it's a monologue. And no matter how much I might teach the perfect pitch, and no matter how much I'm going to do my video sales letters and all the rest of it, that's not the really effective way of persuading somebody. Because the most persuasive person in your life, again, is you. You persuade yourself to do stuff all day long. You persuade yourself to do really smart stuff, and you persuade yourself to do the most insane, ridiculous, stupid shit over and over again just because you tell yourself it's a good idea. Or is that just me? No, that's right. Okay? So anything I say is an opinion. Anything you say is a fact. Anything I say is subject to proof. Anything you say is true because you said it. So you don't sell someone, you don't persuade someone by telling them stuff. You persuade them by helping them get inside their own heads so they can tell themselves stuff. You can't tell someone that they've got a problem or a business need. You can't tell someone that they can get a better career and that they want a better career. But you can help them say it themselves. So that's the questioning part, okay? I'll do this just because it kind of fits in here. 2 kinds of questions, open, closed. Open, how, what, why, where, when, who. Closed, did you, would you, could you, have you, should you. Okay? They're not good or bad. Depends what you're doing with them. If I want someone to keep agreeing with me and I want to build a pattern of agreement, I will use lots and lots of closed questions. Does that make sense? Like that.
Yeah. That's what people say in improv.
Yeah.
You don't end with no, why, you say yes and.
Correct. Yeah. It builds the agreement. Yeah. You never contradict somebody. You always say yes and you can then contradict them, but they'll accept it. Yeah. Improv is a great set of skills, by the way, for what we do for a living. If you ever get the chance to take an improv class or a use your voice class, you should do it. Single best investment I ever made was 15 quid to Manchester Council for a use your voice class. It was a resting opera singer who just did half a dozen sessions on where to put your voice. Yeah, which sounds ridiculous unless you had the course, but Most people speak from here. I'm from Manchester, so strictly speaking, a lot of people in Manchester talk from up there. Yeah. By the way, nobody in Manchester speaks like the Gallagher brothers. They just don't. Yeah? Yeah, people like speak up there, right? That's a man. Then most people speak from here, which is their throat, which is why most people get sore throats if they're on the phone too long. If you've trained a bit harder, you talk from here, and you can do it very simply. You literally put your hand on there, on your sternum, and if you're talking from your chest, you can feel it vibrate. If you're talking from your throat, you can't feel that. Oops. If you're talking from your throat, you can't feel it vibrate in your chest because it's not coming from there. Okay? It's a really simple test, but that is not your voice. Okay? If I'm speaking in a room like this, I'll speak from my chest. But if I'm speaking in a big auditorium, or if I want to get my state out there to the bigger audience, or I need to be up on a scale of 1 to 10, I need to be a 53, I speak from here because this is your voice. This is where opera singers and actors speak from all the time. If you ever listen to Brian Cox, not the astronomer, the physicist, Brian Cox, Succession Brian Cox, that voice, or Anthony Hopkins, that voice does not come from here, it comes from there. Yeah, Anthony Hopkins could literally read a Wikipedia page about anything and make it sound wonderful. Brian Cox does read the most banal adverts for weird shit because he will turn up to anything. He'll turn up for half an hour, do a gig, walk out, and it will be amazing. Yeah. So if you get the chance to find a Use Your Voice class, that feels really nice. Actually, if you can find a chance to find a Use Your Voice class, take it. Okay? There's all sorts of different names for it, but it is fantastic. Okay? Just to project your voice properly. It's why a great actor, I mean, a lot of the actors these days are mic'd up on stage, but a really great Shakespearean actor back in the day, have you ever been to the Globe in London? It's not that big, but it's open air. So if you want to reach somebody up in the circle, you've got to reach your voice out to them in the circle, because otherwise it's going up to the pigeons. Yeah, you can't just shout. That doesn't work, because that's just shouting. You've got to project your voice from here. Okay? What it also does, by the way, it gives you much bigger vocal range, because this is the instrument we have. I don't want to be pompous about it, but it's what we've got. Our voice and our ability to use it is all we have. If we're selling on Zoom, it's a little bit less so because we've got facial expression and we've got all sorts of other hand gestures and all sorts of other things. But if you're on the phone, your voice is what you've got. Invest a little bit of time into learning how to use it, I should say. Now, questions, again, comes in parts. I've written follow up in full because if I write F up there, that just seems a bit rude somehow. Of those 4 elements, this comes before a question. That obviously is the question. That's what they answer with, and that's what we then follow up with. Now, here's the important thing to get in your heads, which I'm sure you probably have. If you don't follow up, if you just ask them a question and they answer it, and you then completely disregard their answer and go on to another question, that is no longer a conversation, that is an interrogation. It really doesn't work that well. Yeah? The next thing you know, you've got car battery and clamps, and it's bad. Yeah? This, to any experienced recruiter or any recruiter that's working a process, is relatively straightforward. The questions that you're going to ask somebody, I would hope, are fairly obvious. Yeah? If you're talking to a candidate, you want to know what their career ambitions are. You want to know how well those career ambitions are being met or are likely to be met where they are. That sort of stuff is, I hope, fairly obvious. If you're talking to a prospect, you want to know what their growth ambitions for the team are and what skill gaps they have or what requirements, extra requirements they're going to have. That's fairly obvious, I think. Give me a little bit of feedback on this. Reassure me a little bit. Yeah, good. Yeah. Otherwise, the word refund will be popping into his head. Okay. But that's not the important bit. That, I mean, hell, if you want me to, I'll send you a sheet full of questions. Okay. But it's completely useless unless you do that and that. The most important parts of a question are what comes before it and what comes after it. I mean, strictly speaking, the response is pretty important because you've got to open your ears, shut your mouth, and take it all in. Yeah? Because the number of people who ask a question and then tune out because there's people who listen and people who wait to speak. Guess who bills? Yeah? So if you're going to ask somebody a question, shut the hell up and wait for the answer. Yeah? Take it all in. And then you can ask the follow-up questions. Okay? Now, within the setup, again, that breaks down into a few critical pieces. Okay? Within the setup, that breaks down into two major things. There's a few that we could put in there, but the two major ones, actually I put them above, which is the, what's the best way of putting it? It's the inoculation. So if there's any potential reason why they might not answer the question or anything that might stop them giving a full answer or anything that might hold them back, inoculate against it. You give somebody a weak version of the objection. Like, Joe, I know this might sound like a slightly strange question. Now, pretty much anything I say, the worst reaction I'll get from Joe is, yeah, that's pretty odd. Yeah? But I've inoculated. Joe isn't going to go, what the, you're asking that for? Yeah? Particularly if I go, this might sound like a strange question. The reason I'm asking is I just want to make sure I've understood whatever. Yeah? Sneaky because in there, because anything that comes after a because is assumed to be true. The second thing is either, there's two terms for it, priming phrase or a focus phrase. They're slightly different, but what they're both designed to do is to get someone to think about a particular aspect of the topic, to think about the topic in a particular way. So I might say, just thinking over the rest of this financial year. Now, what's somebody thinking about the rest of this financial year? Yeah? Thinking about stuff that could have gone a bit better last year. What are you thinking about? Stuff that could have gone a bit better last year. Yeah? Now, if you want to get really cheeky, you can then start to use things called negative commands. Where you say, look, I don't really want to dwell on the fact that you've been let down by suppliers previously. Now, I've just said I don't want to dwell on that, but what are you doing? Dwelling on it, thank you very much indeed. So just thinking about what you're looking to achieve over the next year. Yeah. So the priming phrase,
would you make that an absolute? Sorry. Would you make that an absolute saying?
In what sense?
As well, on suppliers letting you down. Would you not say might have let you down instead?
Depends of the context. So if they have already said that they've had problems with existing suppliers, then I'll just play it back as a fact.
Yeah.
But you're right. Normally, how can I put it? The term that I use for this is something called artful vagueness. Because you're absolutely right, Jerome. It's if I make an absolute statement, you've had problems with suppliers previously, They go, no, I haven't, everything's been fine. No, it's not really problems, it's been slight aggravations, it's things that could have been a bit better. But if they say, I've had problems, and I come back with, I know you've had problems, I'm building back rapport. If they say, I've had difficulties, and I come back with, you've had problems, it's a mismatch. I have to use their words back to them. If I'm not sure whether they've had problems in the past, I'd be artfully vague. So I'll say things like, you may or may not have had a perfect experience from previous suppliers. Things may or may not have gone absolutely brilliantly in the past. I'm sure you've had experiences where you look back and things could have gone a little bit better. It's artfully vague. It sounds like it means stuff, and people interpret it internally as though it means stuff. But actually, it's just interpretation. I'm not actually saying anything. I'm being artfully vague. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah. Because generally, over the last 20 odd sessions we've done, I've very rarely given you absolutes. I've always said, well, depending on the situation, what you might want to do is, or one of the things that does work is, it's not because I don't have strong opinions, because you know me by now, I do. But it is that if I give you an absolute and you can find an exception to that absolute, you just cut the legs off my entire argument. So I try not to give you an opportunity to find an exception. I try to make it difficult for you to undermine my argument. Because if you can't say, no, that's not true, what's the alternative? Yeah, that's true. Bless you. If I can keep somebody agreeing with me a little bit all the way through a conversation, they agree with me and 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 they agree with me. They've got nothing to disagree with, nothing to disagree with, they agree with me, they agree with me. I don't need a lot of big, with £1, I made this deal. That's amateur hour. Yeah. Little agreement, little agreement, little agreement, little agreement, little agreement, little agreement, little agreement. It becomes more and more obvious that we're going to do business. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the setup is what makes the question work. The general rule is long setup, short question, long answer. What most people do in reality is short or no setup, really long, complicated question with 14 subclauses, to which the response is, don't know really. Yeah, not really. I know I'm not alone in that. Yeah. If you get bugger all response from somebody, it's not because the question was bad, it's because the setup was bad, or because you hadn't built rapport. More likely some combination of those two. If you've built rapport and you set the question up well, even if you ask the question badly, you'll still get a really good response from people. Pro tip, by the way, if you set a question up in such a way that you make a case deliberately so people can correct you, okay? That's kind of pro level one up. We say, what a lot of people have said is, it's easier to do this, and this. What a lot of people tell me is, it's easier to do this, and this. With the deliberate intent that the prospect then goes, no, not really. What we prefer to do is that. Hang on, Stephen, you said don't give them a chance to disagree with you. They're not disagreeing with me. They're disagreeing with all the other people. They're just giving me their advice and their suggestion. Yeah? What they're actually doing is telling me how to sell them. Yeah? I have a meeting tomorrow with a prospect who started out by telling me that their new business team is amazeballs and they do this, that, and the other. I take them through the process. At the end of it, they're saying, "Well, sorry, how are you sourcing all those leads? What the hell are you doing?" "Well, I'm doing this. Took them through the machine process. I'm doing this, and that." "Right. And what kind of result?" "Right. Wow. Okay." And then came this golden nugget that all of that had been building up to, which is, "Do you train resources?" "Right. Can do. Why? Would you like me to?" Yeah, if you can teach me to do that." "Okay, that's a call, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you very much indeed." It's not my idea. I wasn't pushing at all. Yeah, I was. They didn't feel pushed though. They're now pulling me. Yeah? It's not that I'm particularly clever, though I am. It's not that I'm clever. It's just that I follow the shit that I teach. Yeah? And that, speaking of following up, follow up is where you take that and make it matter. You either find out what the hell they mean, like the first question to the prospect I'm talking about, "Oh, our new business team is amazing. They're bringing the best results in the industry." "Really? Okay, big statement. Okay, you say your new business team is amazing. How do you mean? What's your definition?" And then we got into it, and 10 minutes later, bless him, he's cut the legs off his entire new business team. And he's telling me that, well, yeah, it's okay with the flatline for the past 3 years. Yeah, best in the industry. Yay. Yeah. And that is where we get into PEA, which is, help me out here, guys. Tell me you know what I'm talking about. I spent too long talking about machine. Oops. That's the one. Precision, empathy, amplify. Yeah. So, in the example I just gave, how do you mean? Or what's your definition? Or in what way? Yeah. I'll be great if our resourcing team was able to sort of bring in better candidates. Okay. In what way? Or better how? Yeah. That's back to that artful vagueness. I literally repeat back what they said, which builds rapport. And then I just ask them, in what way? Or how do you mean? Or could you give me an example? Or what's your definition? Or even, and this is back to my friend who's a consultant psychiatrist who said after way too much wine, I think we're on the 4th bottle at this point, told me that he could teach me how to be a therapist in 15 seconds. I went, 15 seconds? He went, yeah, you've already got it. Well done. Yeah? You literally take the last couple of words of what somebody says, repeat them back as a question. Your mother? A goldfish? A car? And then just let them fill in the blanks. Okay. So I will either do in what way, how do you mean, what's your example, could you give me an example, what's your definition, or I'll repeat back what they said and just say, yeah, wish we were doing better. Just leave a question mark at the end of it. Ellipsis, strictly speaking, it's ellipsis, question mark. They'll then answer because that's a question and I've got rapport with them, so they'll answer. I empathise. I literally say, oh yeah, I'm with you, gotcha. Assuming what they've said makes any kind of sense. If it doesn't, I'll go back to here. But assuming it makes sense, oh yeah, I'm with you, gotcha. Oh, yeah, okay, that makes perfect sense. And then amplify. What is it I'm amplifying? It's not the facts, because the facts are the facts. So what am I amplifying? Why is it that people buy stuff or make decisions or make a change? Why does somebody decide to change their employer or decide to recruit in a different way with a different recruitment partner? They don't do it because of the facts. They don't do it because of that. They do it because of that. They do it because of an emotion. Actually, might be there. Yeah? They do it because of an emotion, and then they rationalize it with facts. Don't rationalize, rational lies. Yeah, a bit like general lies. Rationalize it. So I amplify the emotion. I either amplify the positive or the negative emotions. So if somebody says they want something, by the way, we're actually not therapists. So for goodness sake, stay away from how did that make you feel? Oh, yeah. Okay. But what you can do is say, well, what would that mean? How would that help? What would the impact of that be? That's my favourite one. What would the impact of that be? What would that mean over the next year or 2 years? If that carries on the way it is, where will that leave you? That's my favourite one with candidates. Candidates are saying, well, it's been a bit aggravating because, they've brought in all these changes and I've not really seen any benefit from it. And, there's been a couple of new guys brought in over the top of me. They've something I've been working for and they've been brought in. Okay. First of all, that sounds a bit sucky. Bit of empathy. Okay. It doesn't have to be the cold hard, doesn't have to be the sort of cold hard of, oh yeah, I'm with you, or I understand. It could be, oh, that's got to suck a bit. Well, that sounds amazing. Yeah. But if somebody's had people come over them and there've been some projects that they wanted that they've not been involved in, okay. Well, if that carries on for the next 5 years, 10 years, where's that going to leave you? As in, if you're down in the bottom of the hole and you keep digging, where are you going to find yourself? Yeah. If you're down in the bottom of the hole and somebody's pouring brown stuff on your head and that carries on for another 5 years, where's that going to leave you? That's the amplification. Does that make sense, guys? Okay, here's the pro tip. Emotion multiplied by time. Feel free to write that down. It's the only really important equation I'm ever going to give you when it comes to influencing people. Emotion multiplied by time. If you've got something that's irritating and it carries on for 10 years, it will become a massive problem. If you've got something that's, that'd be quite nice, and it amplifies over 5 years. Yeah. Oh yeah. If I get an extra 10 grand a year. Okay. So if you get an extra 10 grand a year and the bonuses that come with it, and you keep doing that over the next 4 or 5 years, what difference is that going to make for you? Because most people don't think about 5 years from now. They think about next week, next month, next quarter. You take anything and multiply it by time, it suddenly becomes it's the old expression, most people overestimate what they can achieve in a year and massively underestimate what they can achieve in a decade. Yeah. Candidates massively underestimate how shit their position is now, and they underestimate even more how shit it's going to be in a decade. Yeah. Clients who can't find the right candidates, they overestimate their ability to deal with it, and they underestimate how crap their business is going to be in a year or 2 years from now. So you take any positive or negative and you multiply it by time, yeah, again, it's part of the setup. If you cast that forward, if that carries on for the next year, 2 years, 5 years, you pick your timescale depending on who you're talking to. Okay? You're talking to the CEO of a publicly quoted company. You go out short. If you go out too far, it becomes the next person's problem. Yeah? If you're talking to the founder of a big company, it's all their problem. If you're talking to a mid-manager, you're talking about the next quarter, the rest of this financial year. So you pick your timescale depending on who you're talking to and what their situation is. Yeah? Basically, if you take anything, any pain, any problem, any difficulty, any negativity, and you imagine it carrying on for the next X period, it will feel like absolute cack. If you take any positive and you imagine it getting better and better and better over the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it will become immeasurably appealing. That's the trick. Yeah. You don't get someone to go to the gym. I speak as somebody who's got themselves back to the gym recently. You don't get someone to get to the gym by emphasizing how fun it will be to lie underneath heavy shit and lift it, because for most people that's not fun. But if you do two ways, if you say, okay, so how much weight have you put on over the last year or so? Okay, if that carries on, even if it slows down, but it carries on going on, where's that going to take you 5 years from now? Okay, if you could reverse it, and if you could lose that at even half the rate you put it on, a year from now, 2 years from now, where are you going to be? And you put those two things together, and if you give somebody something really brown and smelly to move away from, and really yellow, sunny and exciting to move towards, those two things together create motivation. If you just do one, they might. If you do both, they will. Okay? This gives them something to move towards. This gives them something to move away from. Okay? Now, I know quite a lot of people go, oh, no, I'm not motivated by pain or problem or difficulty. I'm motivated by my goals, by what I want to achieve, by how amazing I want my future to be. Yeah, that's true. I'm quite sure that's true. But what will make you take action now as opposed to tomorrow is the fact that if you don't, yeah, fear of loss, anticipation of gain. That's Aristotle, for God's sake. This isn't exactly new stuff. Yeah? People move towards pleasure and away from pain. Simple as that. Okay? So if you want somebody to start changing the way they think, if you want somebody to start changing the way they act, make them aware of just how painful not changing will be, and how pleasurable or profitable or exciting the future can be. Do both. Yeah? Pain, gain. That's motivation in a nutshell. Don't get me wrong, I've got boatloads of stuff to put behind that, but that's your basic mindset. That's what you're trying to create with somebody. People don't change role because, oh, that sounds terrific. Because at some point, the little voice in their head is going to go, oh yeah, but it's not that bad where I am, and it hasn't, they haven't sacked me yet, and I can still pay my mortgage. But if they're thinking, I've been overlooked, I've been snubbed, I haven't had a pay rise in 3 years, I've got no way of earning bonus, I'm being shafted. Oh, And that sounds amazing. Then you can get someone to change. Now, amateurs in recruitment rely on candidates doing that themselves. Professionals make sure that it happens. Okay? You cannot rely on having a motivated candidate. Your job is to make them motivated. Strictly speaking, if you're in the headhunting business, your job is to take someone, I told you my definition of headhunting, take someone who's perfectly happy in their job, make them unhappy so that you can make them happy again in the future. Or strictly speaking, so that you can make them happier in the future. Yeah? Pretty much the same applies on contracts. Not quite, because it only applies on contracts if you're taking someone out of an existing contract and putting them somewhere else. Yeah? But that's the key to it. Yeah? Does that make proper sense? Yeah? This, by the way, is the part where almost everybody, when they start to get into it, until they've really got practiced at it, until they're really comfortable with the process, that is where almost everybody hears this weird high-pitched squeaking noise, which is where your sphincter's contracting, because you think people are going to think you're a knob. Okay? That's where everybody goes, it feels a bit awkward, it feels like I'm being a bit salesy. Well, don't be salesy then. Don't be salesy. When I'm, you've not actually seen me selling, but actually you have, but I've come across as the least salesy person you could possibly imagine when I'm in a sales situation. Okay? Somebody asks me to give a pitch, I'll give them a pitch. I'll do it without deviation, hesitation, or repetition. But generally, I don't do that because I've learned from my life experience that how can I put it? If I bring me to a meeting, I come over as an aggressive, opinionated cock. Yeah? Probably because I am, but that's fine. So what I've developed over the years is different ways of presenting different bits of me. Okay? So the me that's in this room, at this level, I'm probably on about, as a trainer, I'm probably on about 2 or 3 out of 10. Because if I brought the 10 or 11 version of me, you'd be against the back wall with your hair blown back like a squirrel in a wind tunnel, because he's a bit forceful. Okay? Sometimes I listen to him on stage and think, Jesus Christ, tone it down a bit, man. But no, if you're speaking to 2, 3, 4,000 people, you've got to be there. Okay? If you're speaking to 4, 5, 6 people, you don't want to be there because it's just too much. Yeah. Likewise, when I'm selling or in a negotiation, I tend to come across. This is an old reference now, but you must have seen the old movies. Peter Falker's Columbo, like slightly bumbling, but he's got everything there, and it's just one more question. Yeah, I tend to try to come across as slightly. I'm just making this up as I go along. I've practiced all my ad libs really hard, so they sound like ad libs. It's a bit, but that's just because I've learned from experience that if I speak in full paragraphs with perfect syntax, all the grammar in place, full stops, semicolons, all the rest of it, people get a little bit, no. So I'll just take the edge off, I'll just be a bit, same as I have done with my accent. I did that 4 or 5 decades ago, though. Yeah. I'm a scally from Manchester, but that's not the accent. I have one of those kind of, where the hell is that from? English accents. Yeah. Which is great in America. That's the key to it. Okay. Pro tip. If you want somebody to feel an emotion, who has to feel it first? You do. Yeah. So if Joe's telling me, or if Mason's telling me about, how crap this situation is, okay, I'm not going to go, oh, that sounds awful. How long's that been going on for? What? Rapport. So if Mason's telling me how, shitty he's being treated and how awful it, oh man, that sounds awful. Yeah, I will feel it more than he does, because he will always get a slightly diluted version of my emotion. That's why my state on stage is so big, because if I want 4,000 or 5,000 people to be excited, guess how excited I've got to be. If I want 4,000 or 5,000 people to be really up for it, guess how up for it I have to be, because they're always going to get a diluted version of it. Yeah? So if I'm talking to someone, I need them to feel negative. I'll be, oh shit, that's horrific. How long's that been going on for? Oh man. Wow. I mean, if that sort of thing carries on for the next couple of years, 3 years, where's that going to leave you? Yeah. So the emotion comes from me first. Okay, I'm literally selling the emotion, and then I amplify it with words, with questions. Yes, no?
Yes.
Oh, Mason was like, that was a yes, but okay. We think he doth protest too much, and then SAQ, which is summarize, advise, and question. Now, that question, precision, empathy, amplify, that I might go through that sequence 4 or 5 times. I might go through it 15 times over the course of 2 or 3 conversations. But basically, I will just keep going with that until somebody's in the place where they want to make a change. Yeah? So if I'm going from one subject to the next subject, I use SAQ. If I'm going to end one conversation and set up the next conversation, I use SAQ. If I'm going to end this conversation and close the deal, I use SAQ. Simple as, basically, okay? Because it's the most neat, tidy psychological package I've ever come across. And I say that with all due humility, having invented it, okay? As far as I know. Okay? Simple process. If I summarize back to you what you've said, you're going to agree with it because it's true. Yeah? If I summarize back what we've done, the history, the actions, what our conversation has been, you're going to agree with it because it's true. I don't mean that bullshit that you see on YouTube about, put a spin on it or, paraphrase it. No, don't. Just summarize it back factually and accurately. And then use the power of because. Because the example I gave you of the photocopier research has been done. Okay. Because of that, what suggest is, or because of that, how about, or because of that, why don't we, or because of that, what we could do is, or because of that, there's a couple of options. I then give you my advice. Okay. And then I end it with something very profound and incredibly salesy, like, does that make sense? Is that all right? Is that okay? Those are genuinely my closing questions. Okay? Does that make sense? Is that all right? You happy with that? Is that okay? I can't think of the last time I even did. Are you comfortable going ahead with that? That is as salesy as I ever get, but by God, I've done some revenue over the years. Yeah. Does that make sense? Is that okay? Is that reasonable? Well, of course it makes sense. Of course it's reasonable because it's based on what you've said. Sorry, you have said, not me, you. Okay. So all I've done is take what you said you wanted, suggested a way that you can get what you wanted, and then ask you if that makes sense. Well, of course it makes sense because it's what you wanted and it's a solution to give you what you wanted. Yeah. Back in the academy, I've got a little module called 13 closing techniques to make people feel comfortable. It's vile. I hate it. It's repugnant to me. And I would never use it, but I've put it in there because, I'm teaching sales skills, so people want some closing technique. Okay? But it's things like, the alternative close. Do you want to go away? Do you want to do it this week or next week? Do you want to do it in this or that? The Ben Franklin close where you get someone to draw a line down the middle of the page, you write the pros and the cons on different sides. Obviously, the pros outweigh the cons, so assumptive close. So I'll get cracking on the paperwork then. I'll get the terms of business sent out to you. That's the least offensive. But there's some that are just, even as I write them down or as I say them, I can smell the ripe camembert coming off them because they're just so cheesy. Yeah. It was awful. Yeah? And there are hundreds of these bloody ridiculous bullshit things which are all based on doing a transaction with somebody you've never met before, that you will never meet again, who you don't need a long-term relationship with. Which is the precise 180-degree opposite of what we do for a living. We need our clients coming back frequently. We need our candidates coming back over the course of their career. We can't close someone on going to an interview using some kind of sharp-angled, cheesy technique because they won't show up. And if they don't show up, they won't perform. Or if they do perform, they won't go for a second. Yeah? It all has to be based on advice. Hell, it's even in the job title. Recruitment consultant. It's there in the damn job title. Because if you look at what McKinsey or Bain or one of the big consultancy firms does, that's a pretty good definition of what they do. They go in, they audit the current situation, they look at the process, they look at the history, they look at what's been going on, they find what's working, what isn't working. Then they make recommendations. And the nearest they get to a question is, well, do you want that do you want that in paper or do you want it just by email? Yeah? But that's the process. That's how you problem solve for somebody. In this case, we've done the problem solving here and here. We've created the motivation here. So this ain't no big thing. If you've had a great conversation with somebody, setting up the next meeting should be the easiest thing in the world. If you've had a great phone conversation and somebody says, well, I need to get you on Zoom, that should be the easiest thing in the world. Yeah? If you can't get someone on Zoom, that means that this hasn't worked. If you can't get somebody to set up interviews, or you can't get them to show up to interviews, it means that this hasn't worked. Normally this bit. Okay. I know a couple of you guys have had clients who've just sort of strung out a process over the course of months. Yeah, that's because they haven't got this. They haven't got pain associated with the role not being filled. Yeah, and I suspect, having spoken with a couple of the examples, they've probably got gain because the fact that they are solving all these fires, even though they haven't got the right people in place, makes them look like a hero. Yeah? So they've got not a lot of pain and quite a bit of secondary gain, which is why they've got no momentum, no urgency, no drive, because they haven't got the emotion attached to it. You want urgency, you want momentum, you want progression. It's all about that. All about that. That's my entire sales process. One board, one flip chart, whatever you want to call it. 30 years of my life. Oh, I overran 50. That's exactly an hour. Yeah? Damn.